Welcome, travelers, to the first episode of the B.E.S.T podcast. I'm your friendly neighborhood bard at Mr. Falhorn, but you can just call me Ron. With me is the totally not hangover barbarian Sam,
Hello.
and our forever DM of No Choice, Devilux.
Hello, I usually go by Dev, so I'll be fine.
Alright, so starting out, you've seen the title, he's probably in the thumbnail. I mean, there's no delaying it. Vox Machina just dropped yesterday of the time of the recording, probably be another day before this goes up. And we have all watched it separately. We have not talked about it, so we can all talk about it here. And I want, first of all, each one of you to give me your IMDb rating. So, like, give it in like an IMDb type of fashion. What is your rating straight up?
I would go with something like 8 out of 10.
I'm gonna hit it with a good old 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10, really? I think I saw when I searched it up, the actual rating was 9.2, which I was like, that's insanely high. How is it 9.2?
It is currently at 9.1. It is tied with Arcane, but with a
Yeah,
lot less votes.
I want to give it close to 9 personally. It's like an 8.5 maybe? I don't know if it deserves a 9 really, but an 8.5 for me. I think it was great. So, Sam, 7. All right,
Yeah.
spill the beans. Why 7? You got a lot of hate for this.
Do you mean I'm
Wait,
gonna
so-
get my hate?
By the way, if somebody doesn't know, Vox Machina is a animated show out on Video Prime based on the first campaign of the D&D group, Critical Role. So go on. For sure everybody knew that, but just to make sure.
Right, so 7 out of 10 because I liked it. Don't get me wrong, I liked it, but I don't want to give it higher until I've watched it all.
I mean, that's fair enough, but there's like some points when I'm like, this could definitely be awful in the next episodes, or this could be great.
Like there's a certain creature, for example, and I didn't like the animation on that creature most points of seeing it.
I would
Because,
say
like,
animation is the only letdown for me personally.
I don't know. I think it's an animated series. I think definitely the bar has been flying high for just general animated series. If you've watched Arcane lately, you know, I don't think I can
Marvel's
really
What If.
judge it. Yeah, but it's
Well,
hard
that's a
for me to
different class.
judge it.
I also feel it's really unfair to compare it to Arcane because
Yeah.
budget very different. Budget is so insanely different, and I've got like
It's-
three people I've talked to have compared it to Arcane, and I'm like, just stop.
I think get a
It's,
similar vibe to Invincible, though. I think it's a similar level of
Yeah,
animation. and
for sure.
I would describe it as just enough. I think it conveys what it needs to convey, but it never wastes any extra animation on things that probably don't need to be animated.
Yeah, I agree that it talks a bit, if you've watched Invincible, it's another Video Prime show, it definitely has like this a little bit of gory effect to it in the animation. It's very adult in that sense. And it's definitely reminiscent, especially a lot of the humor as well. Definitely fits the cast, but it also is very reminiscent of this Amazon type of show. It is one thing that I was kind of bothered by it in the first couple episodes is that it was very fast paced. Like there is basically this threat coming up, you know, and it was resolved so quickly that in a way it underplayed it, where realistically this threat would, you know, in an actual D&D like campaign would seem a lot greater than what it was kind of portrayed in the show.
And that's something I thought
spoilers.
about having not actually watched any of the campaign one. I
Yeah, I
don't know
personally haven't
when does this take place? Because I'm assuming if we're like sort of at the beginning, usual starting level is somewhere around level 3, which is a ridiculous level to fight a threat of that magnitude, and it just kind of just jumps into it. So I'm thinking, is this like a bit later in the campaign? Maybe if anybody has watched it.
I personally haven't. I don't think Sam
I
has.
watched- No, I watched the first like 20 episodes of campaign 1, then stopped, skipped the
But it
campaign
didn't
2.
happen. It didn't happen in campaign 1 first 20 episodes, though, right?
From what I remember,
Okay.
no.
So this is probably an older, like a higher level. There's a lot of details. I'm not 100% sure, as I have not watched the first campaign. There is a lot of details. I don't know if you notice in the animation. It's kind of really cool. That I kind of continue to compare it to an actual D&D session. For example, somebody missing and it's kind of being explained by like this way of somebody bumping into you, or you're like slipping, or you're doing something like that. Maybe you're hitting not exactly at him, maybe he's blocking it. All these little details that you can just kind of think through back to how this would have been in a session. I think that's really cool, and it was well done in my opinion.
One of my main concerns when going into it was, is there going to be any prerequisite knowledge of D&D as a hobby? I'm happy to say that no, I don't think there is a single thing you need to know about D&D, but there is a little bit of that, as you said, details, which D&D players are going to recognize.
Another problem with the animation, it's a very small thing, and because I had heard both good and bad things about it, so I was expecting a lot. And I don't know why this stuck with me, but at the end of one of the episodes, there's a horse walking in the background, like as the episode's ending, and the animation for the horse walking killed my soul. This is what I was on about.
I can't say I've noticed this. This is so...
I missed it as well. For me, I think a low point in animation was in the beginning episode, where there is literally a whole cast of characters who are not animated at all. The entire background, all of the characters, and only the mouth of the one character that is speaking is moving. That was kind of like a low point for me.
I mean, I can't say I've noticed anything specific with the animation. I like the art style. I mean, it's not a great,
style is
it's not
great.
arcane, but I can't say that animation ever really took me out, which is the main thing I always look at. It's like, am I still kind of in the show? Am I still following up with the story? And I don't really like get cut off by this very weird animation or by this like completely still frame image that anime usually does, more anime shows. For me, I think my favorite part is definitely, though, I think the humor and the comedy was on point. It was great. I was generally just laughing every episode. There was such great bits, especially Sam's character. There's no doubt best character in that show. It just kept me laughing the entire time.
In I think episode 3 was the funniest episode for me.
Hey, talk about the ending bit.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's another one. So he's a bard. You hear someone, he's a bard, and he makes very funny things and very funny songs, or really cool ones. But yeah, the introduction song, kind of the song he had in their party, they're all like really good. They're all really good. The lyrics are really funny, and the vibe of it all really fits.
Speaking of songs, was not a fan of that one bit where he broke out into a modern genre of music. Not to really spoil
That
anything
was so
specific.
funny. That was so funny.
I do agree. It was
so
funny.
funny.
It was very funny, but it is something that I think Critical Role in general does. They sort of like walk the line of immersion a little bit loose. So it was funny. I'll give it that.
Yeah, I think it's fine, because at the end of the day, it is a D&D campaign, and it was a little bit jarring when you first saw it. It definitely didn't fit in a way into the world, but it's funny, and the show doesn't. I don't think the show takes itself seriously enough, where it really bothers me.
I had the same issue with Arcane though. Arcane also had sometimes, in my opinion, inappropriate use of like modern music and just the random Imagine Dragons cameo. That kind of took me out a little bit.
Whoa! You're making a very.
Don't get me wrong. I love Arcane, I love Imagine Dragons, but in that moment, both together in that scene, it was just a little bit just immersion breaking.
I can't say they fit too well as well, personally, but I did like the song on its own, and I do like the show. But yeah, the clash is a little kind of uncanny valley in a way. It doesn't feel like it belongs to anything.
What do you guys think of the intro?
It's very telling of things to come, I think.
Or is
and
it?
I'm curious, how much of the campaign does it cover? That's something I've been thinking, and I am... Well, everybody here knows me as the spoiler guy. I generally like to spoil myself, and I really resisted to go on the wiki and just check the campaign one, and like, when does this take place, and when are some of these other events going to happen?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested. Like, when the show finishes, so it's 3 episodes each week, right? That wasn't just like a first 3-episode drop.
3 episodes each week, and I believe it's already renewed for season 2.
All right, so we got 3 episodes each week. How many total episodes?
10.
10 total episodes, it doesn't add up, but okay. 3 episodes.
Yeah, I know,
True.
but it is what it is.
So it's gonna be like gonna be 3 weeks of 3 episodes, and then most probably a big final episode.
Yeah, probably a double finale, I'm assuming.
Oh, sorry, I'm checking the wiki now. It seems like it's 12. I thought it was 10 last time I checked.
That makes more sense.
That splits evenly.
Yeah, so...
Oh, I remember now why it's 10. I read somewhere that they planned for 10, and that was like from the Kickstarter money or something, and then there was like 2 extra added at the end.
Oh, let's
So
hope
like
they don't
one of the
suck.
early announcements, was I believe 10 episodes. That's why I remember it that way.
All right. Well, when it's ending, so it's like in a month, right? When it's ending, I'm definitely gonna go on the wiki and on Reddit and go read all the hate posts about how it is inaccurate or how it isn't inaccurate, because I'm genuinely interested in how close to the original they managed to keep it, which I do feel would be hard. But so far, I really like the characters, the portrayal, of course, the voice acting. I think that goes without saying. And just generally, that's why I give it close to a 9. Definitely, it depends how it continues to develop, because it could easily just downhill from here. They started very fast, very high, like the action, everything, the threats. Like building this higher would be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it is a pretty epic campaign in general, I think. So they have material. I don't think they're going to be running out of anything. Speaking of voice acting, I don't have complaints about anything, but David Tennant. That's what I'm going to say.
I was so happy to hear his voice. I love David Tennant so much.
Yeah, I mean they had a lot of great voices. It did, when I heard like voices like that, it did take me out for a second. I was like, wait, is that? But then it got back into the character. So I think we can safely say that it's mixed voices. I definitely think it's a lot better. Sam, for some reason, didn't like it and should be hated for that. At least until he changes his opinion.
I didn't like what?
Oh, you said you give it a 7.
That doesn't mean I don't like.
Okay, in IMDb, if I see a 7, I don't watch it. It's not even worth watching.
Yeah, that's just how ratings work these days. It's like anything below 7 is just actually avoid at all costs.
What do you mean?
Yeah, and only if it's
true.
below like 6, you can hate watch it.
Wait,
6 is like watch Intoxicated, like at least.
Take a shot every time something stupid happens, and then you watch it, and you have fun.
Okay, wait. What do you? So you telling me you haven't watched The Babadook?
No, okay, what?
I don't remember if I have, but I've been meaning to.
What is the Babadook?
It's a 6.8. It's an amazing movie. It's absolutely perfect.
It looks beautiful.
I mean, honestly,
what is it about?
I just hate those ratings, but it is how it is.
Scary horror movie.
Oh, I don't watch those. Still children movies, We could go on. There's another topic that came out this week, also relating to Critical Role. Really, they had a big week this time with the Tal'Dorei Campaign Setting Reborn book coming out. Now, personally, I haven't even looked at it except for like some art and stuff. I know Dev probably has read it 3 times and rewritten it. I don't know if you've got a little chance to look at it, Sam. So, Dev, do you want to give us like interesting points about it? Like what do you think about it? Any interesting topics that it brings up that did not exist in the other books?
So, I haven't actually been into the whole like Critical Role thing until campaign 3, so I don't have a reference point for previous books, but I personally, as a DM, it's not my type of book. I will say that. I have some things I liked about it. Well, I'd say the most important thing about this book is that it is about the original continent of campaign 1, and it takes place, I believe, 24 years later. So it is brought up to the timeline of the campaign 3. That's for anybody who's interested in it. This
so it's
is
all the
what
way
it has
from
to offer.
So it takes the last book you came out, campaign 1, and it brings
It
us
is
up to
place of
date to
campaign
campaign
1.
3.
Yes.
Mhm.
Interesting thing about that, and probably like one of the biggest selling points, is that the original cast, the original heroes, are started out as monsters, so you can use them as NPCs and such. They've done a good job of that. I think it's a little bit weird reading something it's a player class, but it's done as a monster stat block with a lot less detail. But I think they've nailed the aspects that are like important to that class, and the rest of the monsters are honestly not something I'm familiar with. As I said, I'm not familiar with Exandria. If anybody's missing any sort of like basic knowledge about it, there is a YouTube video that Matt Mercer made before the beginning of Campaign 3. It's a fairly short video that just goes over the creation mythos of Exandria, and it's a good intro into either getting into Campaign 3 or into this book.
You talk about the history. That was a really good video, honestly. And I
Yeah.
love Matt Mercer's narrating personally, so it was a pleasure to watch.
With that,
I would say the art on this book is beautiful. What I've seen, at least.
I'm looking at the monster art right now, and I'm in love.
yeah, the art is very 5th edition styled. I would say possibly even higher quality than the official books. There is definitely some really good art.
I would argue for that as well, even. So I saw you wrote. There's one of the notes was about deities, which was interesting to me because I have an opinion about deities in D&D. So I want to know why you wrote it and like what would you want to bring up on that?
Yeah, so like quick overview is that in your typical D&D lore, like Forgotten Realms or most fantasy lore, is deities are real, right? And they walked the planet, they've like walked amongst men, and in most cases they live in the outer planes, which is kind of like a metaphysical place where the beliefs sort of form them and power them up. But that does create like a problem where why they're not interfering with the world. And then you have the opposite of that, something like the Eberron setting, where deities are just, they don't exist. The beliefs are the end of it. People believe in the sovereign host or something like that. The closest thing to a deity in Eberron is Silver Flame, which has been created by the sacrifice of Quaddles. This takes the middle ground approach. Deities are very much real, they very much exist, but they have also fucked up the world to the point where the prime deities have decided this is enough. We're locking ourselves away from the world. So there is this this middle ground where you don't have that feeling of like why are they not interfering. You have the focus on heroes. So if you're playing in a campaign like this, you genuinely feel like you're accomplishing things and you are not just being sort of dragged around by deities.
Nice.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like the sound of that because it always irks me when you're playing a D&D campaign and the fact that gods do nothing. It's like what we all know you're real, yet you're doing nothing.
Yeah, it's like the Eternals now that came out from Marvel. It's like we're viewing. Well, we're told to not interfere, so we kind of that's why we weren't anywhere. It's kind of that level of excuse in a way.
Don't get me started on Eternals, please.
Yeah, no, that's a whole episode of its own. But I'm interested to see if you did you end up. So I know that point about the deities. That was also kind of the recap video of basically kind of the history and how they came up to locking themselves up and everything, which I do find interesting. My problem with deities in D&D, which is like I wanted to bring it up now that you kind of reminded deities, and I want to know if they did anything different in this book, is that a lot of the time they're one-dimensional and they're kind of crowded. So there's a big amount of choices usually when you're playing with multiple books, and they a lot of the times kind of embody this ideal or idea, and I feel that it forces or it kind of pushes players to be a very one-dimensional character, especially if they're doing something that's hard on belief, which I don't like. I wish deities were a little bit more open or a little bit more general. They maybe weren't defined by a very specific thing, but generally more by their belief or action, and then some powers that kind of correspond with that.
Well, in this book, there is deities basically split by alignment mostly. I'm counting here 11 prime deities, and they each have about 2 to 3 domains they govern. So it's not that different to default D&D. I do like something that was a thing in Pathfinder 2nd edition, and I think it's lacking from... I couldn't find anything in the DMG for 5th edition. There are commandments, and it is similar to tenets in Pathfinder, where they sort of give you a way, I guess, ideas to play a character, but it is also mostly for that aspect of if you don't do this, you might lose access to your powers.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm looking at the commandments for each of the prime deities now. Also, there's 12.
there is a so that again can't count to 12. This seems to be a recurring theme. The question is, I mean, I guess the commandments, I mean, it's very technical stuff, right? But I wonder if in a way, I guess we haven't really read into it enough, do they actually encourage the player to be creative and kind of think for himself what would be the correct action to do than having a very straightforward of you have to be good, you have to be bad, you have to help people or you can never help a silvering hand for no reason kind of a thing.
I wouldn't say that it's telling you to do anything, really. I mean, commandments are straight up commandments, something like the Platinum Dragon stand as a paragon of honor and justice, might evil wherever it's found, show compassion to those who have strayed, defend the weak, bring freedom to persecuted, etc. It is commandments that you would expect from a deity, but the book itself, overall, is mostly lore. It's one of the reasons why I didn't particularly care for it. My favorite book, setting-wise, is still Eberron, which is just absolutely full with DM tools like random tables and such. And this is just lore upon lore upon lore, with a little bit of mechanical stuff in terms of subclasses and the monster stat blocks. But that's about it. This is mostly just for inspiration.
Yeah, and it is a 300 plus long book. So there's
280 pages.
200. I thought it was okay. It's 280. That is a lot of inspiration. Let me just say.
And turns out Run also can't count.
Okay, well, 300 is a little bit bigger than 12. I think I get a little credit here.
I mean, this is one example of what I was talking about. I don't know if everybody shares my passion for random tables, but the way I see it, if you have a random table, it's kind of like an improv prompt, right? It just gives you an idea that you probably wouldn't have thought of. And to me, it's very fun if there's like two random tables, you're trying to generate an NPC, and you just roll these two properties that just seem to clash with each other, but you just make it work. You just come up with a reason why is it that way. And it gives you almost infinite number of things to generate. And with this book, they have a different approach where each region, there's the Tal'Dorei Gazetteer, and each region has story hooks. And they kind of just give you a story hook. It's not as little as it is in the table, so it doesn't leave as much to imagination. It is just a paragraph basically giving you a plot hook. Might work better for some other people. I don't know if you have preferences.
I mean, I have mixed feelings on roll tables in general. I sometimes like them. I sometimes feel like they don't encourage people to be creative on their own. And it's kind of like, oh, let me just roll this table and then it'll tell me what I do instead of thinking, okay, I'm in this world, I'm in this position, I am this character, what should I be doing and how realistically should I, or this character that I built and has these inspirations, how realistically should it play out and what it should have. But I think that these challenges that you talk about are interesting in the sense that if you do get into clashing ideas, I think they can enhance roleplay in a sense, but it's not easy or simple to accomplish if you do something like that.
What do you think as a fan of the Wild Search tables?
Roll tables are brilliant.
Okay, what about when they backfire?
No, I think I don't have a problem with roll tables because like it does just give you it can give you help and inspiration. But I think I understand why people don't like them at the same time, to be fair.
If you have a specific idea for something, obviously use that, but roll tables can definitely get you out of your comfort zone. And as I said, use it just as a prompt, not as a final thing. Usually they don't have much more information than 1 or 2 words in them to just literally serve as a prompt.
So I want to go into another topic I wrote, which I was really confused about. And I wrote it down as The Witcher. but I'm not going to be talking fully about The Witcher, which the season 2 came out. We're very delayed to be talking about that, but I did like it. Again, I love The Witcher series, and of course I liked this season as well. But what I want to talk about The Witcher is when I was watching it, it really, especially one of the scenes there, in the mansion, the forest, the kind of frozen mansion that they were in, if anybody's actually watched it, where they kind of get attacked by this beast, which has this human form and is trying to talk one of the characters out of it, kind of trying to call to her and be very kind of just try and convince her that she should live and she's just there and she's not trying to hurt anybody or anything like that. But then Geralt obviously kind of fights her, and it reveals this actually more sinister side of that creature. And I really like in The Witcher not only that, where there's like this duality a lot of the time to monsters in a way you're kind of unsure. In a lot of other scenes as well, it's kind of, and if you play the games or read the books, is there's a lot of the times there's causes. Monsters don't just exist. They exist for reasons. Some of them are the bigger reasons of the world, but some of them are decisions. For example, there's a mission in one of a quest in one of the games, I don't recall which one, I think it is with The Witcher 3, where it's this baby that was kind of just aborted or something like that and buried hastily and didn't give a proper barrier. And then a spirit kind of caught it, and it became this maniacal creature, right? And the way to stop it was to give it basically a proper barrier from its father. And I found that to be really, really interesting. And I really like that idea that monsters have more to them, which is something that I want to say also I kind of did like, is that we actually kind of had that in one of the sessions to a good extent, I think, where we fought a beast in the forest where he was kind of given to one of the characters that also had somewhat of a connection with that beast, that it's maybe trying to communicate, maybe it just looks lost, you know. It is just a beast, it's just its nature, it's not necessarily trying to kill people. And it kind of gives this duality of, okay, I knew that my character doesn't really care. He doesn't care for this animal. This has been killing people on my mission, and my goal is laid behind the destruction of this creature, so I don't care. But some characters, which are a little more caring to nature perhaps, were thinking about it, you know, should we actually kill him? Maybe we should leave it alive. But then there's also the idea of, but if we keep it alive, will it take more lives? So just in general, I really like this idea of the duality of monsters and giving them kind of a reason to exist. And I think people should incorporate that harder into D&D.
I'd agree. I like rant over. No, I agree. I agree with that, because like, I don't like the bog standard of, oh, this is a monster, so it's been put against you. It has to be evil. It's like, no, like, not every like goblins. Goblins in general, murder them. Yeah, everyone's okay with that. But I like the idea of giving monsters more substance, because then it gets players to think more, and you get different kind of roleplay, you get different kind of scenarios, and I like that difference because it's a bit more fresh.
Personally, grey morality is one of my favorite things in fiction, and I'm all for it. But I think it's not so clear-cut that one is better than the other. I think it's just a more modern trend. In early days of like Tolkien's fiction and early days on D&D, it was a simple matter of just getting the world rid of evil. After you spend decades telling stories like that, I think people just want something more, and that's kind of where the evolution took us today. Definitely like it, definitely for it, but it's not like necessarily better or worse than just having a contrast, like a traditional contrast.
I mean, I'm definitely a lot more for it, for the are we the heroes more than we are the heroes. Everything we do is justice and it's good. And usually a lot of these things, they come down to bad actors or bad people and kind of politics more in D&D when it comes to actually the gray line. And I do like it when it also comes through monsters, because it adds another layer of also kind of reality. If you think about what is a monster, you know, in the modern age, maybe not the modern age, but let's go back a couple thousand years. for when Ben wasn't this advanced, and like you walk in the forest and a bear finds you. That's as much as a monster as a D&D one. And it's not necessarily that the bear is evil. It's not even necessarily they will attack you. Maybe it's just protecting its cubs. Maybe it's just protecting its home, trying to get food. It's not necessarily that it is evil in any way. But it also could be. If it's a raccoon, for example.
What's your problem with raccoons?
I think beasts in D&D have always sort of not had an alignment in that sense. But when it comes to like truly evil races and such, I think that the forced shift away from that is not something I'm necessarily all about, like retconning existing lore and stuff. But having a separate setting, like Eberron very heavily ditches the idea of alignment being a set thing, and it is more about the races that are not part of the Underdark, and those ones that are truly evil are sort of just manifestations of one of the creation dragons, Kyber, and the rest of them, just anybody basically who lives on the surface, is sort of just there trying to make a life for themselves, and it's a lot less clear cut. You've also seen that in our campaign, things like goblins and such, just sort of trying to find work and make do.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting point. Which actually brings us to another point that we kind of touched on very lightly outside of the podcast, is the alignment. And I know you said that kind of D&D is trying to get rid of it, and you're really against it. So it's kind of interesting on that take.
I wouldn't say I'm really against it. I'm not a fan of forcefully retconning existing lore. I'd be down honestly for a new default setting for D&D. Forgotten Realms, I think, is kind of boring and basic, and I think it has its place in that classic fantasy of good versus evil. Make a different setting the default. Make a new setting for the next edition of D&D. I just don't think that politics should really affect existing lore.
What do you think about alignment, Sam? I'll give my take last.
I like alignment, but I don't like it as well, weirdly enough. Now, I'll explain that now, because that sounds very bad, or it doesn't sound right, but so I like alignment in the sense that it gives you an idea of, oh, okay, I'm, let's say, lawful good, and I want my character to be lawful good and to, make good choices, but I don't like it when people railroad themselves, and they're like, oh, I'm lawful good, I can never do anything past that. Oh, I can't, I'm trying to think of an actual good example. I
mean, your typical paladin that wouldn't cross the road
yeah,
unless it's on a
stupid.
crosswalk.
Lawful stupid.
I agree with that. I think that this is basically my kind of idea on alignment, where it comes down to, you could say, well, it's not necessarily bad. It's not like it's actually forcing you into this railroady part. But I'm thinking, okay, so what is the advantage of alignment? Because I already know kind of, you could tell players, think, what is your character? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it kind of neutral on most things? Or mostly, I guess you could say, it's a modern... it's more like modern politics and ideas on how you view human life and stuff like that, right? That's the main thing. But I feel like if it's not railroading, what is the point of it? I can already imagine that my character is a very big nerd that would only do things the right way and listen to the law, and is very scared to step out of bounds. And I don't really need a lawful tag to remind me of that. So then the question becomes, okay, but if the lawful is there and it can just railroad people into just always being good without considering that maybe this situation will take their character out of that bound, out of their comfort zone, it will make them do something that they are, usually wouldn't do, because this is not a usual circumstance. This might be a matter of life or death. This might be a matter of revenge filled with emotions that you don't usually feel. And I feel like alignment puts people too much, it shoehorns people too hard.
I have a very strong opinion on alignment, and you are right that it does end up in people shoehorning themselves because I think that is just the wrong way to use alignment. And as my favorite probably D&D setting, the Planescape, it deals with alignment in a very literal way that we in real life, at least in like Christianity, you think of heaven and hell, right? Your actions define you and where you're going to end up in the afterlife. Planescape turns off that to 11. There's basically for every alignment and like a combination of alignments, there is a plane, a metaphysical place where you will face your gods and where you will um, exist for the eternity in the afterlife. Therefore, there is an actual fear of your actions ending up in a place where you might not want to spend the rest of your eternity and existence. So, in that sense, in a campaign that actually has consequences to alignment, my preferred way of running alignment is the exact opposite. I don't like it when players just jot down the two words on their sheet and then drive their actions from those two words. In my opinion, it's the opposite. Write the backstory. What did your character do from the backstory? And then summarize your backstory, your actions up until that point, into those two words. They're just a little overview. And as the campaign progresses, the actions you do, they don't need to be driven by that alignment, but that alignment will over time change, or maybe not, to reflect your total sum of existence before you die.
Yeah, I definitely think another point we said like the word shifts. I think alignment should be viewed as something that is dynamic.
Yeah, and I'm perfectly okay with some campaigns just not needing alignment. I think there needs to be a very strong lore reason to use alignment. I think mechanically it has been all but removed from modern D&D, and it shouldn't be a requirement. But there are some settings that benefit strongly from it when used properly. Speaking of dying, there was actually an interesting bit in the Tal'Dorei campaign setting. The custom rules that I think some people are probably already familiar with Matt Mercer's way of handling resurrection, but there are actually three ways he suggests. And funnily enough, we kind of accidentally ended up doing one of them in our campaign when your character died, Ron.
Oh yeah, that was unfortunate.
It is it is essentially giving an option for a character to come back, but basically changed in some way. Some of it is like the different ways are having the ritual, which I believe is the most popular thing that was posted on Reddit by Matt Mercer or something that everybody knows of, where people can sort of contribute to the resurrection. And I think the final one is like very similar, but it is essentially just repeated resurrections are sort of just chipping away at you. It's
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
interesting.
You lose a bit of yourself every time, kind of vibe.
Yeah. I think there should definitely be a cost to death because I feel like it's become very, very cheap in fifth edition. I mean that's sort of like the opening paragraph in this section where it says character death often becomes no more than a minor inconvenience in some campaigns, and that really is true. Like once you get to a certain level, it's pretty much a snap of a finger to bring a character back, and it's already fairly difficult to die in fifth edition as soon as you get past like fifth or sixth level. I
Yeah,
think
I agree that on that point. I just want to kind of say so for example, when my character died, it kind of happened in a situation where in a disagreement with a powerful, which we didn't really know how powerful back then. We definitely weren't aware of the power of this leader, and he kind of just completely ruined my character, made the entire party kind of surrender in a way and go with him. But this character will also, in the wrong, kind of figure out his mistake and help bring my character back. But I, for one, was very conflicted because I really liked the character I created. This is kind of the start of the campaign. I really wanted to play this character, this class, everything. And, you know, I didn't want to just make another character that's basically a copy-paste. If I'm making a new character, it's going to be very different and a whole new idea. But I also didn't want to feel like my character just, oh, it died? Oh, whatever, dude. We just bring it back. Like, no problem, man. So we were workshopping ideas of what should it be and what should be the punishment, or kind of like what should be the case of it. And my idea was kind of in a way losing my magic until, well, I don't actually know, not as a player, not as a character. I've lost my magic I'm unable to cast it, it actually burns me and scars me when I try to use it. And my character is gonna have to go and figure it out. It's gonna have to understand how can it get it back, how can it retrieve its lost ability to kind of cast magic. And it still knows how to cast, but it doesn't know how to do it without hurting itself. So I'm actually interested to hear from you, Sam, because you're also in the campaign. I'm interested to hear, like, what do you think about that? Did it make it feel that the death still had an impact, but, you know, you still got the character back, and it's still kind of the same campaign?
It gives, I think, having your character essentially crippled in a sense,
Thanks, man.
is am I wrong?
No, I didn't say it wrong.
Yeah, but no, I think it's interesting, and I think it works because there, as you guys have said, there should be side effects from death. It's never made sense to me. Fair enough. It's like, yeah, magic. Obviously, there wouldn't be side effects, but I'm glad that there is, and I am happy how that's happened, because it also gives you now more options roleplay wise, and it gives you more options of like changing your goals, because whatever goals you had before, now your main focus has shifted to, oh, I need to figure this out because I am not liking the fact that I hurt myself every time.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely gave me kind of an urgent mission type of thing, and it made me definitely change my playstyle on my character. It made it a lot more, what used to be very arrogant is now a lot more, no, maybe not in speech, but definitely in combat or in fight, definitely a lot further back, a lot more in the assisting kind of a job, because he can't really fight. He knows that he can't really help that much. He's doing his best, but his best is not really that much compared to your normal adventurer at that level.
Yeah, and I think something that people sometimes maybe forget, like everybody likes winning, but in my opinion, winning is a lot more satisfying when you have a genuine obstacle to overcome. Sometimes like a one shot or something can be interesting where you're like max level and you're just stomping everything, but that should be a real possibility and sort of a consideration before you do anything, but also just the challenge, like an actual challenge of it being even just a possibility, even if it's just a looming possibility, it should feel real. It should feel threatening.
Yeah, I think that this kind of makes it so the session or the campaign doesn't feel like a stealth game where you have the option of doing stuff the other way, or you could just shoot everybody down in a way. But you know, it might be harder, but you can still just generally do it, and there's no real risk. Worst case scenario, you die, resurrect. It kind of makes it a position where, okay, there are these beings, there are these people, these powers that we can't really mess with. Like, we can't just do whatever the hell we want. We really have to watch ourselves around these people, really have to watch ourselves around like these parts, because we know that if we misstep, this could be the end of us, just straight up. You know, there's no mercy in that kind of sense. You can't just go ahead to somebody that's that powerful, tell him what you want to do, attack him, do something like that, and expect to come out even alive at the end of it.
Yeah, and I have to bring this up. One of the few random tables in the Tal'Dorei book is for consequences of returning from death, and this one really caught my attention. Never again. You don't fall unconscious when reduced to 0 hit points. Instead, you remain conscious until the end of your turn without having attacked a creature or cast a spell of first level or higher. While you have 0 hit points, you have advantage on attack rolls. Your attacks deal extra 1d10 damage on a hit. Attack rolls made against you have disadvantage. You make death saving throws as normal. Keep that in mind. You making death saving throws while you're fighting.
Well, you're undead. That's crazy.
God.
Yeah. And you also include including suffering a failure when you take damage. So as usual for death saving throws. And your hit point maximum gets reduced by an amount equal to the damage you took when you were at 0 hit points. So like those attacks. This lasts until long rest, so it's not too crazy. It's not going to permanently cripple your character. But I think it's interesting. It's a very RP thing. You could, like, somebody who's min-maxing could maybe even in some way see this as like a Borderlands type of thing when you go down. I forget what that's called.
Last
the second
chance
window
type of thing. Yeah.
I think it's second
win,
window.
last chance.
But it is really interesting because it does, like, while reading this paragraph, I really did get that feeling of like, never again. You know, you are going to use every ounce of your energy to not go unconscious in those types of situations, and that is something that is genuinely harrowing for a character who has died.
I like the sound of that. That actually sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, it started sounding very OP at the start, but then it kind of brought it back.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, I just never die again. It can't happen. It's fine.
Wait, so last campaign, it was your character that got resurrected, right, Sam? Am I crazy?
Last campaign.
The Pathfinder one.
The
Oh,
Pathfinder.
yes.
The Pathfinder campaign. Right, your character is the one that died and
yes.
resurrected it. Which was a little bit different because we were also decently high level. At that point, adventurers, we were decently well endowed, so we managed to get the resources and mostly do it ourselves. But that was interesting because
you actually earned level 9 just then, which was the level you needed to attempt a resurrection ritual, which is something that is in the core Pathfinder rules, but is actually essentially the same thing that Matt Mercer has in this book, where multiple people need to contribute with their checks, and you just hope for it. You know, it's not a guarantee. It's not just a spell you cast and it happens.
Yeah, I it was very stressful in a way because it did feel like there's a big chance he's not coming back. Especially with the Pathfinder system. If any of you listening have played the Pathfinder, it feels a lot less forgiving than D&D.
Second edition specifically.
Yeah, second edition.
5th edition tends to go around 65% chance to succeed on a dice roll. Pathfinder 2nd edition tends to be a bit lower, sometimes even sub 50% on certain things. And yeah, this was not an easy roll. And I believe somebody even failed one of the preparation.
Yeah, we scuffed one of them. Like,
so it really came down to that last dice roll. Like, everybody was just there waiting for the outcome.
Yeah,
the most like upsetting thing for me at that time was just sitting there watching the dice rolls, and then the fail came in, and my heart lurched. A bit of me died inside, out of the game, because I was just there like, oh no, I've been given hope. I've been given hope that I can go back.
Don't do this. Don't give me hope. Yeah, I guess you were maybe a little bit more involved than I was, you know, the tiny bit.
Just a bit.
But yeah, that was definitely. I think it also kind of gave a little bit of gravity to the death, even though definitely us being higher level makes it a little easier. In this campaign, obviously, our characters, if not for this powerful being that kind of came in and was at fault and decided to actually help. If he did not do that, there would be no way of bringing my character back, obviously. Not at this level, not with these resources that we practically don't have. So now that everybody kind of experienced it, they know that if somebody goes down, that's kind of it. And I don't know, you probably noticed my character started to play a little bit more conservatively, even kind of bugging other characters and being like, maybe you should kind of like chill down a bit. Maybe you should like be more calculated. Don't run in so fast because you could get hurt and stuff.
I mean, like how your character was like, hey, do you think that was a good idea after, one of our characters decided to jump off a moving train?
Oh yeah, that did happen. You say one character, it ended up being basically everybody other than mine, Sam's character, and we're just like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
I absolutely refused. My character did the most sane thing anyone would do in that situation after everyone jumped off, being like, no, I'm not jumping. Then sat down and was ready to enjoy the rest of the train journey and meet them up at the city.
And was thinking about which new friends it's getting.
Like, mate, the saying, would you jump off a bridge if Jeff told you, for example? My character truly showed the reasonable reaction of just being like, no, I wouldn't. Absolutely not. You're insane.
Meanwhile, another character was like, I don't know if he would jump. He probably wouldn't jump first. Another character jumped. Well, I guess he's jumping. Just straight up throw all concern out the window.
Absolutely insane.
It was very interesting though. People did find very unique ways of kind of surviving that, blocking their fall and kind of sliding. Also, obviously, that train we're playing in the Eberron campaign, by the way, the Eberron setting. So, if anyone's interested, it's not as fast as modern trains. Obviously, it's not going like 60, 70 miles per hour. It was going,
No,
I think it's
30
30.
miles an hour.
30 miles an hour is pretty fast, but it definitely you could imagine surviving that if you could cushion your fall and you wouldn't bruise yourself too hard. Especially, being an adventurer, being, quite a bit sturdier than your average D&D NPC.
I mean, one character straight up cast Featherfall. I think that's fair.
Yeah, a bit cheating,
Yeah, you're supposed to jump. If you jump out the train, you gotta take the damage. Come on, God, just accept it.
Yeah. So I told you I kind of wanted to go before we first started, and I want to go on Reddit, and I went on r/D&D because I wanted to find some controversial topic, something that people were kind of discussing that I thought we could give an interesting point about. Now, I found this post, and it was interesting to me because we have kind of spoken about this previously, especially regarding kind of first edition, like old school D&D, and modern D&D in contrast. And it talks about the idea of being in opposition between the players and the DM, right? The DM kind of being against the players, or the players being against the DM. And this guy was also talking about how it can create a very toxic environment and more stuff like that. I think that's less relevant if you're playing with people that you actually know. Obviously, a lot more common if you're playing with kind of random people online or pseudo random people online. But it talks about the difference. Is it better to have more of a collaborating playstyle? We're kind of creating this story together, or are we kind of trying to survive against nature, against this world that the DM is putting up?
Well, interesting you brought up the old school D&D. It was never at any point during D&D's history suggested, even remotely, that the DM should be against the players. This is just a hallmark of a bad DM. If you're antagonistic towards your players, that is entirely your own fault. No system really encourages that. Maybe you can go as far as saying that something like 2D20 or Genesis have those meta currencies where you can have that trade-off of if players want to succeed more, then they give you fuel to have your enemies harder, but that still to me is kind of just a back and forth on equal ground. But I actually have this quote from original D&D, which describes what the DM should do. He or she describes the scene of the adventure, what the characters see, and then allows them to choose their course of action. In such situations, the DM must be a true disinterested party, giving information as required by player questioning and proper action, but may neither help nor hinder otherwise. The DM may answer any questions asked by a player, but if a clue is missed or a wrong turn taken, so be it. And I think that really captures what a DM should be in ideal conditions. Back then, it was more about the game aspect of it, and it was actually not even called a role-playing game. It was called a fantasy adventure game. And people accepted character death. It was easy to die, it was easy to roll up a new character, and it was about the world, experiencing the dangers of the world through whatever characters you're currently playing. These days, there's been more of a shift towards experiencing personal character stories and building up the character story, which it makes it a lot harder for the DM to be even indifferent, let alone antagonistic. Like, for me, it's difficult to be ruthless towards your characters and just have some severe consequences when I know that you care about that character so much more than would be the case in old school D&D.
Yeah, I mean, my point is definitely that in a way, I do like the more collaborative style in a way, but I do, I'm big for, I don't care if you need to fudge some numbers to make it a little bit more interesting. I think that at the end of the day, most people are there, or I'm there, at least in my view of playing D&D. I know people are very technical. Personally, I'm there for the story. So if I'm gonna go and one-shot a monster, it's gonna be really uninteresting. That kind of ruins the plot. But in a way, also, if I'm just gonna get insta-killed and it's kind of like completely ruins the whole story and plot, then that also doesn't really add much. But then I also don't think you should go as far as just completely shoehorning and just babysitting the players and making everything that they want come reality. There should be consequences, but I don't like leaving all consequences to luck or being completely, on one side, just saying, okay, I'm up for. I think the neutral stance is good. I will definitely go neutral, kind of a little bit more collaborating if needs be for the story. But I definitely agree. I mean, this is why I said old school D&D. I think these systems just enable that kind of behavior more. When people don't care as much about their players, when the game is more deadly, it's a lot easier to just be ruthless. But when the game, it makes it a lot easier to bring up characters from the dead, from unconsciousness. It puts a lot of weight on the creation of the character in a way. Then, being ruthless toward the life of a single character doesn't really make as much sense, doesn't really make as much of a difference. It's more bigger consequences that I think are interesting. Consequences of the world, the decision you make and how they affected the people that your character cares about, or the town that you were in, or the people there, which I think mattered more than just a character specifically being taken out, which is why I think that this kind of experience with toxicity or stuff like that just doesn't really even if you want to be kind of this antagonistic kind of, this is more a video game, we're against this world that he created, doesn't really work in modern D&D.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just two very different playstyles, and I certainly have my preferences, but again, it's not something where one is superior to the other, and they're not very compatible, as you said. It's very hard to have a personal character story be invested into a character and then be just thrust into this ruthless world that you're just exploring. It becomes more about the story of your character, essentially. And this is where my take is also on fudging the rolls. I don't fudge rolls, and I don't think it really accomplishes anything for my preferred playstyle. I do agree that it is a useful tool for more storytelling-oriented DMs, but to me, it's about just getting to experience things impartially. And if you are clever and get around those challenges are not going to change. They're not going to adapt to screw you over. And this is where that sort of like idea of antagonistic DMs comes from. I've seen topics like that online where people are like, my players came up with this like clever idea, or they took this like subclass feature or something, and how do I stop them from using it? How do I make it? How do I adjust the challenge? And I'm like, why? Like, do you understand that the world is as it is and they have adapted to it? Why are you not happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's harder if you also didn't think things through, and now you feel like, well, everything you did is now will be easier because you kind of want to give a challenge. I can get that. And like I said, I am a little bit more to the fudgy. I know you're like completely against, so we will never truly agree.
For important moments, I roll in the open. I think it adds a lot of tension.
Yeah.
I don't really like the fudging of roles just because I feel as though it's like, if it's happened, it's gonna happen. You're in a boss fight, your DM rolls a 20, but they tell you they roll the 1, for example. I don't personally like that.
Oh no,
It's like,
I wouldn't do something like that. My fighting is usually you go into the fight and I know my players have become a lot stronger than I expected. I would just give the character more HP, more AC, something like that. I would just change it in the moment to match a better level of threat. Like I am fine with that. I know Dev already said like he believes in a world where your players kind of adjusted that world. And look, if they went and they got the gear and they really prepared insanely well, then they can just go and one shot the boss. I don't mind. And I appreciate that as well. Like, that's
I can respect it as a tool because I actually watched a video like 2 days ago that was talking about fudging, and the YouTuber said that he has essentially what became a house rule in his games where he straight up tells his players that there will be a degree of plot armor. That if a night is going really bad and the monster is critting like 3 times in a row, or they're just having really poor rolls, he will bend it a little bit. He will fudge it, and he's not trying to hide it. And it is something that they expect. They play around, and he runs these like high action sort of heroic campaigns. So it makes sense, right? You don't want to screw over your players when they're supposed to be the heroes. But everything like ends essentially in a boss fight. If there is a boss fight that he warns them about, like, this is it. This is your challenge to overcome. I'm not fudging this fight. And I think that's a very good approach, and much better to some other advice that he mentioned is very common online. If you don't fudge, but if you fudge, don't tell your players. And I think that is the biggest problem, right? If you're fudging, if you're using it as a tool to make your game better for players, tell them. That's nothing to be ashamed of. I personally don't agree with it, but I think it is much worse to fudge and pretend you're not doing it.
I mean, yeah, I can see that because then also it would bring up inconsistency that like very keen players would notice.
It also erodes trust. I think it's most important that the players know that then they can trust the DM, and if you can't do that for whatever reason, like if you're fudging for them positively or against them, it doesn't matter. Like you should disclose that type of stuff because it is a tool at the end of the day. As I said, it's not something that should be hidden. Like a lot of the stuff for a DM is hidden, but I am of the opinion that it's not hidden for any sort of malicious reasons. I just think that, for example, I don't roll everything out in the open, and that's not because I have anything to hide. It's because I just think that when you bring that one important roll to the table and everybody's waiting for that die to roll and what is going to be the result, I think that brings tension. And if I just rolled everything out in the open, it would just kind of like lose its meaning. That's the main reason. But again, I'm pretty open about how I run things, and if a certain creature did this thing or that thing, it might be a little bit metagamey sometimes because it's very mechanics focused, but I don't know. It's how I run. Again, it's perfectly valid to do it some other way for a different effect. You just get a different game.
And you kind of brought me to this point I kind of want to talk about earlier. I completely forgot about it. Because it is interesting. And it comes to the idea of fudging. And it's the concept of we kind of all enjoy the random aspect of D&D. Personally, I'm all for it. If it goes too hard into one side, it is kind of unfortunate. But I don't mind failing. Like my character failing an attack roll, my character failing an action. If I wasn't really just put into the situation where, well, if you fail, you die, and that's it. There's nothing to do, right? If I'm put into a situation where there's an open combat, there's many decisions to be made, and I try to jump over the specific fence and I couldn't do it, I'm now kind of stuck on the other side. I take that as an interesting concept. I take that to the story level. Okay, so my character kind of tried to do this, it failed. What else can it do? What else can it? How would it react to this failure? What could cause this failure? And also like describing it in a way that's interesting, personally, from my point of view. Of it's not just it couldn't jump the fence. It's something happened. Maybe you got stuck on something. Maybe something distracted you. Maybe somebody bumped into you. This kind of interesting concept, which I also kind of saw in Vox Machina. But not everybody's like that. And that's kind of the problem when it comes to what do you do when RNG is bad? How do you get players into a good mood? How do you get players interested in the fight where it feels like they're just getting rolled by RNG? They're getting rolled by the dice. There's nothing really they can do. Everything they're trying to do is failing. And it almost doesn't matter what choices they make.
Sam, do you want to go first? Because you're more on the receiving end of this.
What, are you saying that I have bad RNG?
No, as a player versus DM, I think I think DMs are just not as affected by this. To me, it's almost a good thing if the monsters fail.
I mean, I think don't get me wrong. I don't mind failure. Like, I think it helps weave an interesting story, and it allows you to do interesting things. And as long as the failures are kind of like described interestingly, so like instead of I missed the attack, it's the attack like whipped by him because I'm having an off day. And as long as you consider that your failures help develop a narrative or your character, then it's fine. Though I will admit, it irks it all.
Yeah.
It can feel really bad when you've rolled like 4 times and all 4 times you've missed, and then you've lost all your spell slots. But
when it goes bad, it goes bad, and it feels kind of shitty.
It does feel shitty, but I do think it's like, it's just not your day. Just accept it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as I said, as a DM, I don't really get to experience that because failing just means you guys are succeeding, so somebody's winning, and I have less to worry about the repercussions of maybe somebody dying in a fight and whatnot. But as far as failure goes, I I guess I don't really think of it as failure. I know some players are more about the whole idea of I want to do this, and then the dice tell me can I do it or not. For me, it's just I roll the dice. I want to see what happens, and it's not so much about the failure or success. It's about which outcome am I getting? Which branch of this story are you taking?
I think it's definitely, it can be surmised in a way in the very specific line, the classic DM line of you can try, which is how I look at everything, Like I'm not doing something, I'm trying something, which is a very big difference.
Yeah, exactly. It only really sucks in combat when it's something very straightforward, such as an attack, which either hits or misses. And I think with more modern systems being the rules heavy systems at least, I think don't really do combat justice in the sense that like one of the reasons why we stopped playing Pathfinder was because there is just 3 actions per turn, and oftentimes you will fail one or two of them, sometimes even all three, and that just really rubs it in every turn. Like 3 rolls and failing like one or two, it's just too much, and they all have a very clear cut outcome. But in more freeform systems, or something like the Genesis one shot that we played recently, where the dice can sort of have a benefit, even if you didn't succeed at the thing that you were trying to do, and you can actually use that result narratively, and it's not just a binary yes or no. That's when it gets interesting. That's where I don't really see it as a failure.
Yeah, I think there's another point I wanted um to bring up about what Sam said of like the institution's description. So yeah, when if I TM or if I do a one shot or a campaign that I used to run back in the day, I definitely would take AC as a spectrum. I think a big mistake that you can do as a starting DM is to take it as a kind of a barrier between a coin flip, right? And I always look at it as a spectrum. So there's obviously kind of a success and a fail criteria, but in the description and in the description and bringing it to life, I think it's very important to look at it that way. If the AC is 14 and you rolled a 13, maybe you hit his shield. You at least got to him. He managed to block it last second. There's like a lot of impact to it. You kind of you just still feel like you did something. Well, if you got a 1, a nat 1 or something, you probably tripped over. Maybe you fell. Maybe you got completely distracted. There's like something very off that happened. But it's not really the same, right? A 5 failure is not really the same as a 1 less than the AC failure. And I think it's important to describe that because it makes the character feel like those near misses actually mean something. Even if, mechanically they don't, D&D is more than just mechanics. It's also a story. So when you make it sound and make it feel like they are contributing, they are doing something, even if it's only narratively, I think it does add a lot.
I think that is something that can be used to an extent to soften those blows when you roll badly several times. The DM or even the player can describe it in like a very dramatic way. That's maybe one way to salvage that situation, and just run with it. Just think of it as as this great tragedy that like befell your character. Maybe even remember it for many future sessions.
That's all for this episode, the very first episode of the B.E.S.T podcast. I'm pretty sure you all kind of gathered what you can expect here. It's all about role-playing, D&D, and D&D related content, but not included on the D&D system. These episodes are going to be about an hour long, releasing once every week. So feel free to come by, drop a comment, subscribe if you're actually interested to see when the next episode comes out. And we'll see you on your next visit. Bye.
Bye.